Imagine answering a simple newspaper ad. Comely widow seeks companionship. A chance for love, for a new beginning on a peaceful farm in Indiana. But for over 40 men, that ad wasn't a promise of happiness. It was a death sentence, written by one of the most ruthless female serial killers in American history, Belle Gunness. This is the dark legend of the murder farm. Her farm wasn't a homestead, it was a graveyard. She didn't just lure these men with promises of marriage, she was a master manipulator. As one profiler later noted, like many psychopaths, she was very astute in identifying potential victims, painting a captivating picture of the life they could share. She knew exactly what these lonely, often wealthy, men wanted to hear. She wrote them love letters, fed their dreams, and convinced them to bring their life savings with them for their future together. And when they arrived at her remote farm, their future ended. Their money became her money. Their bodies, well, they simply vanished. The sheer scale of her operation is what chills me to the bone. She didn't just shoot them. She butchered them. It's believed she fed some of the victims' remains to her pigs, the ultimate disposal system. Others, she buried in the soft, dark soil of her own property, right between the vegetable patches and outbuildings. She was accumulating a fortune not through hard work, but through insurance fraud and cold-blooded murder, turning her land into a factory of death. But here's the question that haunts me: how did a woman operating in the early 1900s get away with this for so long? How could so many men disappear from one single farm without anyone raising the alarm? The answer is a terrifying tale of greed, trust, and a society that simply wasn't looking for a monster in the shape of a hard-working farm wife, and it's the key to understanding how her nightmare lasted for years. That's what we're uncovering next. So how does a woman become a master of murder on an Indiana farm? The answer lies across the ocean, in Norway. Long before she was the infamous Black Widow, she was Brynhild Paulsdatter Storseth, born in 1859. And in 1881, she arrived in America, like so many others, searching for a new life. But beneath that modest farm girl's facade, she was already harboring something dark, something deadly. Her first marriage should have been the start of that American dream. But instead, it was the start of a terrifying pattern. Wherever Belle went, tragedy followed. There were fires, suspicious fires that conveniently destroyed property just after she'd taken out insurance policies. And then there were the deaths. This is a little-known but chilling fact that points to her monstrous beginnings. It's believed Belle's early crimes involved poisoning. Not just anyone, but infants. She would allegedly take out insurance policies on children and then collect the money after their sudden, unexplainable deaths. Can you imagine the coldness? The calculation? This wasn't a crime of passion, this was a business model built on the lives of the most vulnerable. Picture her. A young immigrant woman. To the outside world, she was hardworking, perhaps even quiet. But on the inside, she was a predator, learning her craft, refining her methods. She was learning that death could be quiet. That it could be slow. That it could be made to look like an accident or an illness. And most importantly, she was learning that it could be very, very profitable. The fires and the early deaths were her training ground. They were the experiments that would later be perfected on her farm of horrors. But this pattern of tragedy swirling around her had to raise eyebrows eventually, right? How did she manage to keep escaping suspicion and move on to her next victim? The answer lies in a simple, yet devastatingly effective weapon she possessed, one that had nothing to do with poison or axes, and everything to do with perception. That weapon, and how she wielded it, is what truly made her one of history's most terrifying killers. So she had learned her craft. She knew how to profit from tragedy. And now, she was ready to build her empire of death. In 1901, she found the perfect stage, a remote, 48-acre farm in LaPorte, Indiana. To anyone else, it was just a quiet piece of land. But to Belle, it was a blank canvas for her horrors. It was the perfect place to hide secrets beneath what looked like peaceful, productive fields. It was here she married Peter Gunness in 1902. And if you think Belle's pattern of tragedy would change, think again. Their marriage was shockingly brief. Just a year later, Peter was dead. The official story? A truly bizarre and gruesome accident. The story went that a heavy sausage grinder fell from a high shelf and struck him in the head, killing him instantly. But the coroner wasn't buying it. Despite the official story, he reportedly called it a case of murder. How does a sausage grinder just fall exactly right to kill a man? It felt too convenient. Especially since Peter's infant daughter from a previous marriage also died suddenly while in Belle's care. The rumors in Laporte started to swirl. People talked. They whispered. They were suspicious. But here's the thing about rumors: without proof, they're just stories. And Belle was a master at presenting herself as a victim of cruel fate, not its architect. She was a grieving widow, left alone to run a large farm. She played the part perfectly, hiding her monstrous nature behind a veil of respectability and tragedy. But running a farm that size alone was hard work. She needed help. She needed money. And she had a new, brilliant, and utterly ruthless idea. Why wait for family members to die when you could simply advertise for them? Why rely on fate when you could lure willing victims right to your doorstep, with their life savings in their pockets? This is where her operation went from a series of suspicious tragedies to an industrialized killing machine. The method she devised was so simple, so effective, and so chillingly modern, it would become her legacy. So how does a widow alone on a farm lure dozens of victims? She didn't wait for fate. She invented a new kind of trap. Belle Gunness became a pioneer of evil, using the "Lonely Hearts" columns in newspapers like a fisherman uses bait. She wrote ads as a comely widow, seeking a kind and generous man to share her life with. But there was always one condition: he must have a cash fortune to invest in their future. She wasn't looking for love. She was screening for victims. Wealthy, lonely men from all over the Midwest answered her letters. They arrived by train, full of hope, their life savings in their suitcases. They were greeted by a seemingly kind, hard-working woman. And that was usually the last time anyone ever saw them alive. The operation was brutal in its efficiency. Most were killed by blunt trauma to the head, often with a meat cleaver. Some were likely drugged with chloroform first. Then, the real work began. The dark details uncovered later are almost too horrific to believe. Dozens of shallow graves were found on the property, containing decapitated and dismembered bodies. Many victims had their throats slit. She didn't just bury them. It's believed she fed some of the remains to her hogs, the ultimate disposal method. This was a slaughterhouse. One investigator would later state, Gunness had murdered 42 men by his count, accumulating over $250,000 from their spoils. That's millions in today's money. She was a serial killer and a highly successful entrepreneur of death. She had help for a while. A farmhand named Ray Lamphere helped her with the gruesome tasks and concealment of the bodies. But even he became a liability. She fired him, allegedly over jealousy. And that was her fatal mistake. Because a scorned accomplice who knows all your secrets is the most dangerous person in the world. Lamphere knew everything. And when the end finally came for Belle Gunness' farm of horrors, it came not with a whisper, but a roaring, mysterious fire, and it was Ray Lamphere who would hold the key to unlocking the full, terrifying truth. That final inferno is where the legend meets its shocking end. It all ended in fire. On April 28, 1908, Belle's farmhouse erupted in flames, a roaring inferno that lit up the Indiana night. By the time firefighters arrived, it was a smoldering ruin. And in the ashes, they made a horrifying discovery: the bodies of Belle's 3 children. And next to them, the remains of an adult woman. But this wasn't just any body. It was a headless female torso. Everyone assumed it was Belle. A tragic, if suspicious, end to the strange rumors surrounding the widow Gunness. A horrifying accident. But almost immediately, things didn't add up. The head was never found. And that missing head sparked a rumor that has persisted for over a century, that Belle Gunness, the master manipulator, had faked her own death. That she had killed another woman, placed her body in the house, and set the fire herself to cover her tracks and escape. Imagine that. The ultimate vanishing act. But the fire was just the beginning of the horror. With the world now watching, authorities started to dig. Not just in the ashes, but all across the farm. And beneath the peaceful, scorched earth, they found a sinister secret that had been festering for years. They didn't just find one or two bodies. They found dozens. Shallow graves. Mutilated remains. The farm wasn't a homestead, it was a graveyard. The sheer number of victims was more than anyone could have imagined. The murder farm became a gruesome national spectacle, a nightmare made real. But this discovery created a massive mystery. If that wasn't Belle's body in the fire, then where did she go? Did she actually escape? And what about Ray Lamphere, the fired farmhand who knew all her secrets? He was the prime suspect for setting the fire. But was he a jealous accomplice getting revenge? Or was he just a pawn in Belle's final, masterful plan? The trial of Ray Lamphere wouldn't just determine his fate, it would try to unravel the truth about the headless torso, and whether the most dangerous woman in America was still out there. The aftermath was a national obsession. The sheer scale of the horror unearthed in LaPorte sent shockwaves across America. The press gave her a name that would stick forever, the Black Widow. And her story became a dark legend, a perfect encapsulation of greed, cunning, and pure horror. Her farm was no longer just a piece of land, it was a dark tableau of betrayal, a place where the American dream curdled into a nightmare. And people couldn't look away. The murder site became a popular tourist destination, with thousands visiting to glimpse the horrors uncovered. They came by the trainload, gawking at the scorched earth and the now quiet fields, trying to comprehend the evil that had festered there. They took souvenirs, pieces of wood, bits of bone. It was macabre, but it spoke to a fascination we still have with the monsters who walk among us. But the biggest question was never answered: what happened to Belle Gunness? The headless torso was never positively identified. Was it really her? Or did she, in her ultimate act of cunning, fake her own death and simply vanish? For decades, there were supposed sightings. A woman who looked like her in California. A mysterious figure in the Midwest. The legend grew that she had escaped, that she was still out there, a ghost who had cheated justice. Ray Lamphere was convicted of arson for the fire, but he always maintained his innocence, claiming Belle was still alive. He died in prison, taking what he knew to his grave. And so, the mystery endures. Did she perish in the fire she may have set herself? Or did the Black Widow spin one final web of deception and escape into a new life? Her story doesn't have a clean ending. It lingers. It haunts. It forces us to wonder about the nature of evil and how someone can hide in plain sight for so long. But it also connects to a much larger, more terrifying question about American history itself, a question about the lonely hearts ads that kept appearing, and the other predators who may have learned from her playbook. That's a darkness even deeper than Belle's farm.